Hey everyone, I was just sitting at my desk at work this morning and it's home office, and I picked up my Magic 8 ball and I was having a play around with that, and then I was just laughing to myself. I was reminded of a story. It was picking up the ball was how I nearly lost my balls in a motorcycle accident. So I thought I'd share that with you. It's crazy when I think about it, and also it's such a long time ago. It was, goodness me, late 70s. I just turned 18, and I said to my dad, I want to go and learn and practice Spanish before I get to my A level. And he said, okay. He said, well, I've got a friend of mine in San Sebastian. Why don't you spend some time down there? And I said, that'd be great if you can arrange it. So he said, look, I've arranged it, 6 weeks of living with them, and they really don't speak English. So you're going to have to sort of sink or swim, and learn Spanish. And I said, okay, fine. So he said to me, how are you going to get there? And I said, well, I was going to take the motorcycle. And he said, oh, fair enough. So I had at the time a 1970 650 Triumph Bonneville. And it was a great bike. I mean, I absolutely loved the bike. I'd only had it maybe 6 or 8 months since I passed my test. And I said to him, I'll just ride that to Spain. So I got a lot of spares, clutch cables and throttle cables and millions of nuts and bolts, because it was a Triumph and they shook a lot and you lost your bolts and bits and pieces along the way. And that's cool. I was okay with it. Massive toolkit, some clothes for 6 weeks, and I thought, right, I'd go. So it was quite funny actually, because the night before I go, Dad said, what time's your ferry crossing? I said, I've got to be down at New Haven like at 5 or 6 a.m. He said, well, I'm working, so I can't get you there. I said, well, no worries. I said, a mate of mine is going to come down with me to New Haven. And he said, well, in that case, take the Land Rover, stick the bike in the Land Rover, and, he can drive it. You can have a rest because you're going to have a long journey. I said, fair enough. So a mate of mine turned up, put the bike in the back of the Land Rover, drove down to New Haven, and I got on the ferry, 6 o'clock in the morning, got into Dieppe, New Haven, Dieppe it was in those days. And I rode all day, and of course, no sat nav, no phones. I just genuinely kept stopping off and saying to people, my best French, où Paris and où Bordeaux and things, just along the way, getting directions along the way. And eventually I stayed in Bordeaux. I think it was near Bordeaux. I'd done about 8 or 9 hours. I was really tired. The bike was hard work. It was, I think, of just 4-speed, a really heavy throttle grip. It was quite tiring. Anyway, first time abroad as well. So the next day I got up and I rode towards Spain. And this is where it all gets very crazy. So I got lost basically on the Spanish Pyrenees, totally lost. And I got to Bayonne and Biarritz, and I just got onto the Pyrenees and I just got completely lost. So, and it was now night time because it had taken me again all day. I got up late and one thing after another, just couldn't find the way. And I ended up on the Pyrenees at night time. And in true sort of typical Triumph style back in the day, the headlamp blew. So I thought, well, no big deal. I always carry spare bulbs. So I stopped by the side of the road and I swapped out the bulb, so a tiny little bulb. I mean, it's probably like candlelight, but I stuck the bulb back in and I set off. And what was really weird was that instead of seeing like a horizontal beam, I could just see like a vertical beam. And I was thinking to myself, that's really weird. I can see the tops of trees, but I can't see much on the sides. And maybe I put the bulb in wrong. Maybe I just, it was two-way. Maybe I put it at that point. A car was coming straight towards me, and I was probably doing 30 to 40 miles an hour, and it was getting, it all happened so fast and yet so slow. So right at the last moment, I'm hauling on the brakes, at which point I realised, of course, I'm on the wrong side of the road. Hey, I'm 18, I've never ridden in France or Spain, I'm tired. I'm on a lonely pass in the middle of nowhere, supposedly, on the Pyrenees, and the only car I meet, of course, is on his right side of the road, and and I'm on the wrong side of the road. So anyway, bang, straight into this car, and I flew over the handlebars, over half the car, and rolled down the side of the Pyrenees Mountains. I mean, you couldn't write this stuff, and I literally I landed through bushes and long grass and rolled down the hill. I sort of looked up and thought, blimey, looked back up, and the road was, I don't know, 20, 30 feet higher than where I was. And I was still sitting there thinking, oh my God. And the next minute, two guys just grabbed me. I mean, talk about, never move someone when they're injured, but we didn't know what we didn't know back in the day. These two guys grabbed me, one on each sort of shoulder, and hauled me back up the mountain, and basically sat me down on the side of a road. And all I could see was the bike was V'd into the car. It had literally pushed his radiator in and was standing bolt upright in the middle of this guy's car. And I'm lying on the floor thinking, oh my goodness, what happened? The next minute, an ambulance turns up, and they start rattling at me in French. And I didn't speak French, but I knew a little Spanish, and enough to say, mis cajones, which is my balls in Spanish. So we were laughing. I wasn't laughing, actually. I was saying, oh my God, thinking the worst as a young man. And I think they probably had a smile on their face. Anyway, cut a long story short, everything was fine. I think what had happened was I'd gone off the bike. I'd clipped either the mirrors, or the tank had a raised petrol cap, maybe that. I don't know, but I'd hurt myself, in a place you don't really want to hurt yourself. And anyway, so they put me in the ambulance. They took me to the hospital down in Bayonne somewhere, and they x-rayed me, checked me over, and said, look, incredibly, there's nothing wrong with you, nothing. So they took me to a hotel, and I honestly, I didn't have by this stage, they'd taken my passport, they'd taken everything, actually, all my luggage, the bike, everything. They just took me into a hotel, and put me in a room. And the next morning, I went down the reception. They couldn't speak anything in English, and they said, yes, police station, effectively, they were telling me. So I went to the police station, and I found my way there, and they didn't speak much English. I mean, it was, as I say, late 70s, probably 77 or something like that, 78 maybe. And they said, come with us. And they put me in the car and drove me to, it seemed like the middle of nowhere. And I thought, I have no idea what I'm doing in this car. But eventually took me to an English person who was living in the countryside. I mean, she was an old lady, maybe a 90-year-old lady, who made me a lovely cup of tea. I mean, when all else is going wrong, have a cup of tea. And she said, all right, dear, let me get you some biscuits, and what happened to you? And I explained the story. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe she'll translate for them, or maybe she didn't speak any French. So, I mean, it was really bizarre. The gendarmes were sitting there. I'm having a cup of tea. They didn't join us for the tea. I'm just chatting with her, having a biscuit, thinking, I don't know what's going to happen next. Anyway, they take me back to the police station, where in walks the guy in the car, the driver of the car who I'd hit. So he says to me, are you okay? And I said, oh my goodness, he speaks English, thank goodness, from Belgium, really nice guy. And I said to him, oh, I feel so bad. I said, how's your car? And he said, it's a write-off. I said, oh no. And he said, yeah, it's been put on the back of a pickup truck, or a rescue truck, and being taken back to Belgium with him and his whole family. They're all having a ride back in the truck. And he said, I just came down here to fill out the paperwork and make sure you're okay. I mean, how nice is that? And I said, man, I'm so sorry. I said, clearly I just got confused and was riding on the wrong side of the road. And he said, yeah, don't worry about it. It happens. And anyway, so I filled in all the paperwork. It was totally my fault, obviously. And I had one look at the bike, and it was completely wrecked. I mean, the whole front end was stoved in. And the police said, well, merci, thank you, and signing the paperwork, and off you go. So I walked down to the train station, and I thought, what am I going to do now? I just haven't got a clue what to do. And I sat there for probably about 4 or 5 hours trying to work out my options. So do I get a train back to the UK? But then I didn't want to leave the bike. What about the people I'm going to in Spain? What am I going to do? And this went on and on. I was just sitting there eating bread and cheese on the sidewalk, thinking, oh my goodness, it's a mess. And in the end, I thought, oh, you know what, I'm going to have to ring the people I'm going to see and say, I'm really sorry, I'm running late. I'll see you eventually. So I pick up, I go to a pay phone, of course, and loads and loads of francs all lined up, which had to drop in, dial the number, international number. from France to Spain. A guy picks up, and he doesn't speak any English, but he calls his son across, and his son does speak English. So he says, you know, where are you? And I explain where I am. He said, Nick, I am 1 hour down the road in San Sebastian. Literally, San Sebastian to Bayonne and Biarritz. It's very, very close. He said, I'll come pick you up in effectively what was like a transit van. So I just stay at the station. He comes along in this transit van. We get the bike into it, we rope it in there, and we go back to his parents' place in San Sebastian. And I stayed there for 6 weeks whilst we try and get the bike fixed. And you know what? It was an absolute nightmare. We had to write letters back to Triumph in the UK to try and get them to send parts, because there wasn't a Triumph dealer there at the time. And this correspondent, to cut a very long story short, we shipped the bike back freight, and I just took a plane home, and eventually the bike was taken to a guy in Shoreham who sort of specialised in British bikes back in the day, and about 4 months later he'd fixed it. I rode it, and it never felt the same again. Psychologically, it just never felt the same again. I saw there was a wobble. He rode it, my dad rode it, my brother rode it. There was nothing wrong with it, but I never felt it was right. So just shows that when you have a trauma like that you know, you sort of, your brain just can't get your head around it. And I thought to myself, this bike is just not for me. So I actually sold that Triumph 650 and bought a Triumph 750 and a Triumph Bonneville T140 V750. And I absolutely loved that. It probably didn't have quite the classic look of the 650s, but you know what? I loved it, and I rode that for a couple of years right across Europe again, and thankfully never had a sort of so bad crash as that again. And anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. It's quite a great story, and you know, part of the learning experience and part of the rider experience that sometimes these things happen to us and we just have to sort them out. So yeah, it was a great reminder from the Magic 8 Ball. So I'll share some more when I get the chance, but hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.